Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. Big hugs everywhere. I do hope you're doing great. I'm doing well, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 2 of our story tonight. I just love these long stories. I don't know about you, but it's just so exciting because in these stories you get that character development, you get to know about your characters, and it just makes the story so much more exciting than if it was just simply 30 minutes. So I really think it's worth persevering with lovely stories like this. You know, in England, when you have the soaps in England, like you have EastEnders and Coronation Street and stuff like that, people look forward every single day to a new part in the movie, you know, in the soap. So what happened yesterday? Where's it going to go today? And it always makes life in England a lot more exciting when you've got a storyline. And I hope you feel the same way about these stories. But before we continue, we've got a young man called Sam who's been asked to babysit his little nephew. And so that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to be babysitting his nephew. And I've got a funny feeling that something rather untoward is going to happen. I don't know about you. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with part 2 of our story.
"Look at it this way, sis. Who would you rather trust?" Sam's mother had said. "Some random babysitter that you know absolutely nothing about at all? Or my son Sam, who loves the bones of his little cousin? My son will be much more concerned about Billy's welfare than himself, I can assure you of that. He'll keep a steadfast eye on his little nephew all night while you're out having a great time at that party. You deserve to have some fun, sis, for once in your life. And to let your guard down, for goodness sake. Think about it, the party is only 2 hours away from your home. It's very convenient. So if you're worried about anything, you can always come back home relatively quickly. Thank your lucky stars that the party isn't being held in Detroit, for it would be a 9-hour drive if that were the case. Then you'd probably not go anyway if I know you. I mean, think about it. You're not going to be desperately far from home, are you?" "No, I suppose you're absolutely right, Julie. You do raise some very significant points. I mean, the party is going to be located not too far away from where we live. So maybe I should go after all. I know Dylan will be absolutely delighted if I accompany him to the party, so I can cheer him along with that speech of his, that he's absolutely dreading, I might add." "But of course you should go, sis." Sam had privately wondered how his mother could have so much indomitable faith in him. He did well enough at school, got reasonably good grades, but his mother emphatically believed that Sam was emotionally intelligent, savvy and astute. She'd often say this, "Do you know what, Sam? You can be intelligent, intellectually bright, but emotionally very stupid. I've seen it enough, I can assure you," she had said proudly. "But you, Sam, you have your wits about you. You always look at the big picture. You're a very discerning young man." Sam had agreed to babysit his nephew, while his aunt and uncle had gone off to a big 40th birthday bash at a rather rustic outdoor venue for his uncle's closest friend, who was turning 40 years old. He had been practicing his speech doggedly for weeks on end and studying a book which gave you step-by-step instructions about how to give a very good speech that leaves behind a lasting impression on all the guests in attendance. It was necessary to employ humour to keep people thoroughly engaged. The book also advised the speech to be short and memorable, rather than long and tediously boring. Most of the guests would be staying overnight in their own sweet little chalets, all paid for very generously by the host. But staying in the chalets was not something the Valinskis intended to do. They would enjoy the party and some dancing later on in the evening, and then they would return home. Dylan Valinsky had grown up with his best friend Garth, and had known him since he was 4 years old. He hadn't been looking forward to doing this speech in front of over 100 guests, but he would have done anything for his best friend, who had also delivered a stunning speech for his own 40th birthday a year earlier, so he knew he needed to reciprocate that kind gesture.
even if it almost killed him to do so. There was going to be a barbecue, fireworks, and plenty of dancing at the party. The Valinskys had assured Sam that they would be back home by 2:30 at the latest the following morning, which would be a Sunday, taking into account, of course, the 2-hour drive that they would need to take from their home in Ontonagon County that was in close proximity to the Porcupine Wilderness State Park in Michigan. Sam knew how particular his aunt, Mrs. Beth Valinsky, was about her beloved Billy, and tried to offer her as much reassurance as he possibly could, insisting that Billy would be fine in his safe hands. No, he wouldn't forget Billy's meal at 5 o'clock on the dot, as Aunt Beth believed her child's routines were very important and should remain structured. Yes, he did know how to put the dinosaur-shaped organic chicken nuggets under the grill. And no, he wouldn't give Billy any Tom and Jerry's cookie dough ice cream unless he ate all his dinner first. Yes, he did know how to steam broccoli, and yes, he would make Billy eat at least 2 florets, as they are good for you. Yes, he would read him a bedtime story. Yes, he would check on him every 20 minutes or so, just to ensure that his cousin was all right. And no, he wouldn't go to bed at all until the Valinskys came back in the early hours of the morning. Yes, he would stay up all night and wait for their return. And no, it was not a big deal. Goodness gracious me, Sam thought privately to himself. Aunt Beth really was overwrought about little Billy, and needed to be persuaded over 100 times, over and over again, before she was finally satisfied that Sam would indeed keep his word and dutifully watch over his cousin. "You're a good boy, Sam, you really are," she had said, as she was about to leave for the party. She ran a hand under his chin and looked gratefully into his eyes. "I really appreciate what you're doing for me, Sam. You have no idea what this means to me. You're taking good care of your cousin like this, I mean." "But I told you, it's no problem, Aunt Beth. I'm quite happy to look after him." The couple had left the house at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Aunt Beth had looked absolutely stunning. Sam always thought his aunt looked rather ravishing, but this evening she was exceptional. She could have been on the cover of a magazine, he thought, and even told her as much. "Aunt Beth, you look amazing!" Aunt Beth looked delighted. She always appreciated a compliment, but this was one very well deserved, as Sam was not the kind of teenager that said things at random that he didn't mean. "I mean it, you really look amazing, Aunt Beth. I like your dress you're wearing. It glitters, and the red colour, well, it's striking. I hope you don't overshadow Garth's wife at the party." "Well, I'm glad you like it," said Aunt Beth, doing a little twirl for her nephew, and unable to hide the satisfied look on her face. "My mother would never wear anything like that, Aunt Beth," said Sam, sounding disappointed. "I don't think my mother even owns a dress." "That's because you know what your mother's like. She never liked dressing up very much," said Aunt Beth. "But Julie's a very beautiful woman, you know, inside and out, and I hope you realise that, Sam. I hope you appreciate what a wonderful mother you have. You don't have to dress up into stunning clothes to be beautiful, you know. Beauty comes from within." Sam didn't say anything, but he privately thought that Aunt Beth looked like a Rolls-Royce, while his mother Julie looked like a knackered, worn-out Ford Escort that could do with another coat of paint and a trip to the panel beater to knock out some of the bumps in the scaffolding. But the less he said about that, the better. That evening Sam was reasonably proud of himself. He had managed to grill the chicken nuggets under an open grill without even burning them, which would have certainly impressed his mother. Maybe there was a cook buried inside him after all. Jamie Oliver, eat your heart out, he thought. Furthermore, Sam had artfully persuaded his cousin Billy to eat the broccoli he had steamed for him, which in itself was a laborious undertaking, as Billy detested eating his greens. "But I don't want to eat the broccoli. I hate broccoli. It's so slimy. I don't want to eat it." "But you have to eat it. I promised your mother that if you didn't eat your broccoli, that you wouldn't get any cookie dough ice cream, and I can't break my promise to her." Billy popped the broccoli florets in his mouth, and moments later said, "Look, I've eaten all my broccoli." He stuck his tongue out. "Now can I have some ice cream, please?" "I'm proud of you, Billy. Well done. Of course
you can have some ice cream. You've eaten your greens, haven't you?" Sam was impressed that his cousin Billy had eaten the 2 broccoli florets, so he dished him up a generous bowl of Tom and Jerry's cookie dough ice cream. When his cousin had polished the ice cream off, he cheekily pulled out the broccoli florets from the sides of his cheeks that he had stored away like a chipmunk. He dropped them onto the kitchen table triumphantly and said, "Thank you, Sam, for the dessert. You can have the broccoli back. I hate it. It's so slimy." "You cheeky little devil," said Sam. "I can't believe you did that, Billy." He looked in stunned surprise at the 2 wilted broccoli florets lying haphazardly across the kitchen table, that looked like they'd taken quite a bad beating in Billy's little mouth. The naughty kid looked as proud as Punch for his clever duplicity. His bright blue eyes gleamed with mischief. Sam sighed. "You're naughty, very naughty. You know, Billy, you were supposed to eat that broccoli. You tricked me. If your mum knew about this, she wouldn't be best pleased." "Well, it's called being clever, isn't it?" said Billy proudly. "I'm never ever going to eat my slimy broccoli, never ever. But don't tell Mum my trick, because she'll never forgive me if she knows what I do." "Don't worry, Billy. You're a cheeky little thing, and you've got quite the nerve on you. I'll give you that. But your secret's safe with me. I'd never dream of telling your mother what you just did. She'd probably die on the spot. So I never saw the broccoli you regurgitated." He winked at his cousin. "I don't actually blame you for spitting it out. I'll let you into a big secret. I also hate broccoli." "You do?" asked Billy. "Hate it," said Sam. "But don't tell your aunt that." "My mother's so horrible," said Billy. "She always makes me eat my greens. The very worst is spinach. I hate spinach. It's not so easy to store in my cheeks, you know." Sam was surprised at how ingeniously bright his little cousin Billy was for a 7-year-old boy. That evening, Billy had carefully selected the story he wanted Sam to read for him that night, while he sat up in bed wearing a pair of Mickey Mouse pyjamas and hanging on to Sam's every single word, his eyes widening in excitement when the story became more interesting. Sam was reading a story to little Billy about a lion called Simba, who had a roar on him that was so ear-piercingly loud that he terrified all the animals, and he wondered why he had no friends. He had no idea that his roar incapacitated not only his enemies, but his friends as well. The story amused Billy and had made him chuckle. "That's a funny story. I can also roar like Simba could. I can scare my friends and my enemies away," said Sam. "Look, I'll roar like Sheba for you." He opened his mouth and began to roar, and Sam burst out laughing, because Cousin Billy sounded absolutely ridiculous. "That's not how a lion roars," said Sam, laughing. "You sound like a laughing hyena. Look, I'll show you what a lion sounds like." He began to scroll through his cell phone, and then he found a series of recordings on a lion's roar, which he played for little Billy, who sat upright in his bed with wide eyes as large as saucers, listening to the recording with an expression of wondrous awe on his cute little face. "Is that what a lion really sounds like?" he whispered. "It sure is," said Sam. The recording was exceptionally good. The sounds of the lion's roars were very intimidating. It almost felt as if a lion was hiding under Billy's bed and was about to pop out from his hiding place and tear the two of them apart. "That is the scariest sound I've ever heard," said little Billy. "It sounds like the lion is in the room with us, don't you think?" "It does. But the good news, Billy, is that the lion is not here in the room with us, is he? He's in the wilderness far away, probably somewhere in Africa for all we know. This is just a tape recording, so it can't hurt you," said Sam, pressing download on his cell phone, deciding that the lion's roars were so spectacular they needed recording and were well worth saving. "I feel very, very sorry for poor Simba. He must have been such a lonely lion, especially if he had such a dangerous roar like that, because nobody wanted to be his friend, did they? Because everybody was scared of him." Sam waited at the end of Billy's bed
for his cousin to finally fall asleep, and he didn't have to wait for long. Then he trailed downstairs to make himself comfortable on his uncle's couch in the library, all the while chuckling to himself at about how terribly affrighted poor little Billy had been when he'd listened to the lion's roars. Sam sat up on the couch, shocked by how long he'd been fast asleep for, cursing himself for his apathetic insouciance, and that was when he heard the strange thumping noise again, followed by the sound of broken glass. It was coming from the kitchen. For a second Sam froze. His knees began to tremble. He rose up quickly to a standing position from the couch, standing rigidly still, every muscle in his body tightening and stiffening, while the colour drained away from his face. He could feel his heartbeat increase in intensity, like a wild animal, sensing the very presence of danger. Someone was in the house. Oh my God, someone was in the house. This just could not be happening. Not now, not tonight, not while he was on babysitting duty. Sam began to panic. Little Billy was upstairs, lying fast asleep in bed. Sam had negligently failed in his duties tonight, and had failed to check in on his cousin. Sam quickly grabbed the cast-iron fire poker by the fireplace, for it was the only weapon he could find to hand. He clandestinely crept behind the library door, to listen carefully to the muffled noises going on in the Walensky's house. Whoever had broken in was trying their level best to be quiet, but not exactly succeeding in their endeavours. The thumps he was hearing could have easily awoken the living dead. These intruders clearly believed that no one was at home. The library door was very solidly built. It had been purchased in Morocco by the Walenskys, was magnificently carved. The heavy door always remained open, so it was an excellent hiding place, and you could hide there without being seen. But Sam didn't feel confident or safe in the Walenskys' house right now. Every part of him was screaming to get the hell out of the place. But then there was little Billy's safety to consider, and he couldn't just abandon his little cousin, although the temptation to climb out of the library window and bolt out of the house was foremost in his mind. He could hear the padding of footsteps on the floor of the kitchen. Whoever had entered the house was definitely still in the kitchen. He drew in a sharp breath when he heard two distinctive male voices. A chill crept down his spine. Oh my God, there were two of them. This was a worse-case scenario than he could have ever envisaged. What chance did he have against two men? Little did Sam realize that little Billy, who he assumed was sleeping obliviously upstairs, had actually heard the furtive intruders breaking into the house. The young boy had awoken with quite the start, for he'd heard movement around the house, and pebbles being crushed outside of the window. It had scared the bejesus out of the little boy. In his fear, little Billy had stood up in his bed, leaning out of the window to observe what was going on. He instinctively knew that someone was out there. He let out a tiny little gasp when he'd seen two figures skulking outside the house, pressing their faces against the windows as if to look inside the property to ensure no one was there. These were bad, bad men that wanted to get into the family home. Little Billy at 7 nervously called out to his cousin, "Sam! Sam! I'm scared! Someone's trying to get into the house!" But as he cried, there was no response from his cousin, who should have heard him from the library that was adjacent to the stairs. Little Billy did not know what to do. If the two men got into the house, they might hurt him. They might hurt Sam. His mother had warned him never to trust strangers. If someone tried to talk to him, he should always run away and hide. Strangers could not always be trusted. His mother had drilled this into his young mind often enough, as so terrified was Aunt Beth about anyone potentially trying to abduct her son. "What do you do, Billy, if a strange man approaches you and asks you to go back to his car to see the kittens he's got there? Or he tries to give you some candies? What do you do then?" "Well, I don't trust him. I don't go to his car to see the kittens, and I don't accept any candy from him. I run away as fast as I can, and I look for a cop, someone wearing a uniform that I know can help me." "Good boy. That's what you always need to do." Billy's mother had not told him what to do if there was no cop to run to for help.
He thought about crawling under the bed, but then he knew if he hid under the bed, he could easily be found by those two horrible intruders that were in any moment about to break into the family home. And then he heard it from the bedroom, a banging sound, followed by the sound of broken glass. He had seen the two men squeezing through the window of the kitchen and climbing straight into the house. They were so big. Billy tried to think about the best place where he could hide. Even though his cousin Sam was big, these men were so much bigger than his cousin. There was no time to lose, Billy thought. His tiny little heart pounded violently in his chest. He had never felt so desperately afraid, apart from the time in the movie he had been watching, when a horrible man tried to catch all the dogs on the street and put them into a large crate. But one of the dogs had bit the horrible man and taken off his hand, and Billy was so happy because the dogs all managed to escape. Little Billy crept into his mother's room, and using the sliding door on the patio, he accessed the fire escape, which was a thin line of iron stairs that led from the balcony to the ground. Billy ran out into the yard, with wallops of cool breeze brushing against his skin. His first thought was to run to the woods. That would be the very best place for him to hide, but it was so dark in there, and could be very scary at this time of the night, but not as terrifying as the two men that had broken into the family home. His mother always warned him to be very careful of strangers. Billy had a favourite tree in the woods. He'd go and hide in the tree branches until his mother came home. He wished he had a cell phone on him. Some kids his age had a cell phone, but his mother had insisted having a phone at such a young age was not a good idea. But if he had a phone, he could call his mother and tell her about the horrible men that had broken into the house, that had climbed through the kitchen window. His mother would be very upset about that, because when people came to visit, they always came by the front door. If you climbed through a window in the middle of the night, it meant you were a very bad person. Billy was in no doubt about that.
"Are you sure no one is in the house, Ernie? Are you absolutely sure?" came the voice above a whisper that Sam had heard all too clearly. "These people are rich. They could have a firearm. If someone was around, we'd be bloody defenceless. I don't fancy being locked up for years and years over a damn book. For God's sake, Trout, get a grip. Are you a man or a mouse? I told you the people are not here tonight. I've done my research. I'm not exactly throwing you into the lion's den, am I? I know what I'm bloody doing. Otherwise we wouldn't be here, would we? Look at the sink over there, bro. There's some dirty dishes soaking in the sink. 2 to be precise. They look relatively fresh. It means someone might be in this house. I'm telling you, someone could be in this house. What about the dirty dishes? Are you really that dumb, Trout? Maybe the couple ate over those plates and left in a tearing rush. They didn't have time to wash their dishes, did they? That often happens. How often do we leave the dishes piling up in the sink before one of us gets round to washing them? I told you, they've gone to a 40th birthday bash. No one is at home. We've got the place to ourselves. Then why do I get this feeling that someone is in the house? I don't feel good about this. I've spent a stint in prison, and I'm not going back over a bloody book. Not for you. Not for anyone. Keep your hair on, Trout, even though you haven't got any. You're a prize ass, you really are. I told you, no one's bloody here. The owners have gone out. The house is empty. So stop bloody whinging, will you? And get a move on. We need to find that library fast. We're looking for a Pacific book for Marcus. You've got the name on a piece of paper in your pocket, so get it ready for me. I think we should take some more books from the owner's collection for ourselves while we're at it. We can sell them ourselves for big bucks. I'm sure they must all be valuable. The owner of this property is a book collector, and by the looks of things he's got a hell of a lot of money. Look around you at all this stuff. These people are absolutely minted. We're going to be paid big bucks from Marcus, and we can get extra money for stealing some other books that look valuable to us. So I don't need you losing it, bro. Now we need to find that library and a locked glass cabinet. That should be easy enough to locate. How much is this book worth, Ernie? I never knew books could be valuable. I just don't get it. It's worth a bloody fortune,
"That's what. Marcus told me about it. Now let's find the library, shall we? We can't dawdle, so get a bloody move on. Even a sloth would be faster than you. Why I brought you to help me on this mission, God only knows. You're such a bumbling idiot, Trout. I can't believe you knocked over that glass vase. Only you could do that. You're lucky no one's in the house tonight, or we'd already have been arrested by the police. You're like a bloody elephant in a china shop. I forgot how ungainly you are."
Sam stiffened as he listened to the two whispering voices. His heart began to pound violently in his chest, and the sounds of boots padded across the floor. Oh my goodness, they were coming his way, getting closer and closer and closer, too close for comfort. There was no time to do anything. He'd have to remain discreetly hidden behind the door. He couldn't find an alternative hiding place. If the truth be told, hiding behind the heavy carved door might be the very best place to hide after all. He wondered if he should call 911 to inform the emergency services that there was an intruder in the house. This is what his aunt would have expected him to do. But if he did so, he might draw attention to himself from these men, putting himself in harm's way. It was better to remain still and hope for the best. Let these robbers take what they needed to take, and when they vacated the property with their ill-gotten gains, he would finally call the police. Sam felt terribly afraid, for he'd never been thrown in a precarious situation like this before. You heard stories, didn't you, about burglaries that had turned violent, where people had often been killed or shot dead at the scene of the crime. But he overheard that the men were not carrying a firearm, but there were other ways to skin a cat, were there not? And for all he knew, the men could be concealing some kind of weapon. With one hand he fiddled awkwardly with the cell phone in his pocket, as if in some way the cell phone offered him a lifeline of security. Because, if need be, he could press the button and hope that the police would come as soon as possible. A little voice in his head warned him to leave the cell phone well alone and remain discreetly hidden behind the door. "Remember," the voice encouraged, "when the men have got what they want, they will go, and you and Billy will be fine. These men probably don't even want any violence. They just want one of Uncle Dylan's valuable books." The truth was, nothing had prepared Sam for a break-in like this. In his other hand, that was profusely sweating, he was still tightly grasping the fire poker. He hoped he wouldn't have to fling it at the intruder, but if the worst came to the worst, that is exactly what he would do. He didn't fancy himself coming up against the might of two powerfully strong men, who could easily overpower him if push came to shove. By the sounds of things, the two men intrinsically believed that no one was in the house. That had to be a good thing. They were clearly interested in one of Uncle Dylan's books that was worth a pretty penny. It was unlikely they would even disturb Billy, who was innocently sleeping upstairs, tucked away in his bed, totally clueless as to what was going on. And Sam could only hope that little Billy would stay that way. He knew his little cousin would be terrified if he were to know that two men had broken into the family home. Sam deduced that these well-informed men appeared to know a great deal about the Valinskis and his uncle's prize book collection, yet they seemed blindly oblivious that his aunt and uncle had a child who might just be at home under the charge of a babysitter. Had they really not thought about that? These people had clearly not done all their homework as concisely as they thought they had, which was a good thing as it gave Sam a fighting chance of not being discovered. Sam held his breath. His heart palpitated in his chest, the beats beginning to thunder in his ears, drowning out the raised whispers of the two men. Sam's breathing slowed down as the two men entered the library. They were so close he could have literally reached out and touched one of these perpetrators had he so wished to, which was an unnerving, rather disquieting thought. Surely these men would feel his presence. Did they not say when someone was watching you that people could sense they were being watched? It would seem that even though Trout had spent a stint in prison and was clearly being derided and bullied by this man called Ernie, who was a bit of a bull terrier, he probably was the sharper of the two men, because he had initially pointed out that he was certain someone was at home. Sam could only hope with all his heart that his little cousin Billy would stay obliviously fast asleep in his bed upstairs,
and not be rudely awakened by these intruders. The thought of his little cousin trotting innocently down the staircase, wearing his sweet Mickey Mouse pyjamas, only to observe the two robbers wearing ski masks over their faces, almost made Sam squirm and have a full-blown panic attack. He knew the men's disarming appearance would terrify little Billy. As he thought about his cousin, unfortunately his Aunt Beth's face flashed into his mind, an ever-cruel reminder of how he had catastrophically failed in his babysitting duties tonight. If only he hadn't fallen fast asleep, he might have been aware of what was going on around him, and succeeded in calling the emergency services before the men broke in. Sam knew he had been too sleepy to react efficiently to what had been going on. He had faithfully promised Aunt Beth that he would stay awake all night until she finally returned home from the party. In his gut he knew he had betrayed his aunt's trust. If she were to see what was happening now in her house, she would absolutely lose it. She would be so disappointed in him. Billy was only a kid. Surely these men wouldn't hurt him, Sam reasoned with himself. They hadn't broken into the Valinsky's house to hurt a 7-year-old boy. They were obviously doing a job for a man called Marcus. Sam had gathered that much, who was keen to get his greedy, grubby hands on one of Uncle Dylan's prize books, and had got these men, both Ernie and Trout, to do his dirty work for him, and was calling all the shots, so that he could remain scrupulously clean and untarnished from this insidious crime, of which he was heavily involved. It was always the way, wasn't it? Someone with wealth and power, treacherously pulling the strings in these nefarious crime syndicates, if you could call them that, so that they could stay out of trouble. Sam reckoned that this made Marcus 1,000 times more obnoxious than both Trout and Ernie, who were being used like puppets in a children's show to do his bidding. Uncle Dylan would be absolutely mortified to lose a precious book of his, especially if it really was so valuable. But that was the least of Sam's concerns right now. While Uncle Dylan's books may be a treasured collector's dream, nothing mattered more than staying out of harm's way. He knew his Aunt Beth would agree with this. She'd want Sam, in these hair-raising circumstances, to remain discreetly hidden behind the door of the library until the perpetrators had left the premises, which is what he fully intended to do. "This is it," whispered the man, who called himself Ernie, letting out an impressed whistle. "Look at this place. How the other half live. Look at these books. There are hundreds of them. They're like works of bloody art. This stuff must be worth a bloody fortune. I feel as if we've walked into an Aladdin's cave of books. Never seen anything like it in my entire life. Have you ever seen such an impressive collection? I'm telling you, bro, these books have got to be worth a pretty penny." "I've never seen so many books in all my life," came Trout's awed reply. "They all look hell of expensive, don't they? Some of them are old. They could be antiques, but they're still in pristine, perfect condition. I've never seen such a fine collection before. If we take some of these books for ourselves, we could get rich. There are unscrupulous dealers out there just like Marcus that'll do anything to get their hands on books like these. Some of them are clearly first editions." "That's what I've been saying all along, Dopey," said Ernie. "Marcus doesn't need to know about the other books we intend to take, does he? But if we take as many as we can carry in that bag of yours, we'll be laughing all the way to the bank. You can bet me on that." "If no one is in the house, as you say, Ernie, please can I take my balaclava off? It's so stuffy wearing this thing. I feel as if I can't breathe properly." "What the hell is wrong with you, Trout? Of course you can't take your balaclava off. You don't know if these bloody people, whatever you call them, the Valinskys that own this house, you don't know if they have hidden cameras in this room. They could have pictures of us on record that they might show to the police. We can't afford to be lax. I'm surprised that after you spent a stint in prison, you don't know any better. We don't want to get sloppy, do we? Sloppy people have a nasty habit of getting caught. Look over there, at that glass cabinet. Marcus was telling us to look out for that. Oh my God, can you believe it, Trout? Talk about being lackadaisical. The keys are in the cabinet door, and the couple are out. You would think with valuable books like this, they'd lock them away safely. Instead, the man of the house leaves the keys in the glass cabinet. And furthermore, the couple doesn't even bother to alarm the place, even if they do live out in the sticks. Does the man of the house not realize that there are book collectors out there that will employ nefarious tactics and means to get some of his books? And yet he has no security whatsoever. The man's as dopey as you, Trout, and that Dalmatian of yours, Dodo. Dodo is not dopey, came Trout's defensive voice. I won't have you demean my dog like that, nor will I have you demean me. How dare you speak to me like that? Oh, I'm sorry, don't overreact. You're not dopey then, nor is your dog. But I guess the man that owns this house is. The security will likely change when Mr. Dylan Valinsky, if that is his name, discovers his priceless treasures have been stolen. I bet he'll completely lose it when he discovers his prized book is missing, said Ernie with a satisfied smirk. The man called Trout put the large duffel bag down on the library's luxurious red carpet, while Ernie turned the key in the glass cabinet that contained the very special collection of books. Sam watched the men from behind the door. He noticed that they were both wearing gloves, probably so they didn't leave behind any fingerprints, or damage some of the pristine books that had never been manhandled before a day in their lives. But by the looks of things, there was nothing remotely professional about these two ungainly, rather cack-handed men. So there we are, that's the end of part 2 of our story. Part 3 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.